Right. I'm going to talk about the genesis of this talk first. So last year, when I was here talking about GitHub Copilot, I noticed that we had a GA release of real-time intelligence, and I've heard nothing about it since. Right? So I submitted a presentation saying, why is no one talking about real-time intelligence? I need to find out that now someone is talking about real-time intelligence later on, right? So what was going to be a deeper dive in presentation is now going to be a sort of across the top. And if you do really, really want to hear about real-time intelligence and the depth of what it can do, I'd certainly encourage you to go and see Kevin and Alicia's presentation. I think it's at 2 o'clock this afternoon. So anyway, yeah, I was introduced, so let me just get my clicker. So there I am. That was me last year. So so I'm Microsoft MVP. I used to be an MVP for many years. Then I joined Microsoft. You're not allowed to be an MVP when you're Microsoft. So I'm an MVP again. I said IoT enthusiast there because I'm going to talk mostly around IoT scenarios rather than other types of streaming. But obviously, from streaming perspective, it could be logs. It could be anything. So anything that's large data. I say dog parent ahead of child parent because I probably care more about my dog than my kids. It's probably not true. And then the last couple of things there, friend swore, and I was recently diagnosed with ADHD, which is no surprise to all of my friends because basically I talk all the time. Right. So anyway, moving on. So anybody who's done a lot of stuff around big data, and we all remember big data, I suppose, right? Actually, let me just see a show of hands. Who's done a lot of IoT in the room? Log streaming, change data feeds, those kind of things, right? So anything that's got large volumes of data. We probably all remember this, the 4 V's of big data, right? So I've seen various versions of this. I've seen the 7 V's of big data. I've seen the 42 V's of big data, right? So it's pretty wide and broad, but this is the traditional one. And I thought this is quite a useful thing to put up just to get a sort of a reset of why you might want to use some of these tools. So volume, obviously, we're talking about streaming data. We say real-time intelligence. Is there really such a thing as real-time? There's latency and everything else, right? So it depends on how you're doing things and how important it is that it arrives. Real-time usually implies cost. So the closer you get to real-time, the more the cost goes up, of course. So volume is one thing. Speed, obviously, that's another thing in terms of how often things arrive. Variety and veracity. I live in Perth in Western Australia. Perth is a mining town, so we have big mining operations, BHP, Rio Tinto, a few of those kind of big organizations. A typical mining circuit may have 75,000 tags that are reporting every second as a typical thing, right? So we're talking about very, very large volumes of data, and we're talking about quite a lot of variety. So I want to just level set on that. But the main thing for me, and it's a thing that I've always spoken about generally, and that is that as far as IoT is concerned, it's an integration problem. That's why I talk about IoT at an integration conference rather than a data conference, right? So, although I do that as well. So you can imagine that from a real-time scenario data capture sort of thing, so anything like mining circuits as an example, SCADA, so that kind of like large-scale interface, operational historians storing large volumes of data, filling in gaps, those sorts of things. But at some point, it's all well and good. From a production and processing perspective, you may have an HMI, human machine interface, that shows you where things are and how things are performing from a process and production engineering perspective. But very often, you need to make decisions. And if you're making decisions, you can use those, but you want to get that volume of data somewhere else in order to make the best use of it. So it's an integration problem. Now, in terms of streaming data, I've put this one up here because it's still valid, but who's done a lot of stuff with stream analytics? I mean, you said you've done some IoT stuff. Anybody else in terms of stream analytics and that sort of thing, right? So it's the way that we've been doing it for years, right? The idea of having an ingestion engine, some form of complex event processing engine, so that's what stream analytics is doing, and then putting it somewhere else for help around decision making. Another example, which is kind of sort of on here a little bit down the bottom here, is that whole idea of a Lambda architecture, that whole idea of slow data and fast data. Fast data arriving, reference data and other things are being put in to elaborate on the solution, right? So You know, again, very traditional, still very usable, still very valid right now, right? So it depends on what you want as to what you use. So, some of these transitions are a bit rubbish, aren't they? Right, so Fabric. I won't say it's the new kid on the block. It's been around for a couple of years now. I think it went GA November 23, I think, from memory. Think of Fabric as a SaaS data platform. Right? So think of it as a way of gathering all of your data assets and everything in one place and using those and being able to communicate between all those things really simply. We've probably all had a bit of a play, like I say, about stream analytics and all those sorts of things. We've probably had a bit of play with some things like Synapse Analytics, right? So that whole idea of having another engine. So what this is doing is creating a consolidated, homogeneous platform for you to have a bit of a play with. You'll see there with real-time intelligence that I've put up there, but obviously there's a bunch of other things there, data factory we all know about, data engineering, warehousing, data science, all those good stuff is all in one place. But obviously what I'm going to be talking about is that. Okay. So, the new way. It's on my screen. No, right. So, this is the basis of real-time intelligence, right? So, I wish there was something there that I could point to, but I can't, so I'll have to point over here, so apologies. I will walk over that side of the stage at some point as well, just as the people on that side of the room don't feel left out. But essentially, you can see on the left-hand side over there, the data sources, and they're very typically the sort of things that we'd expect from a normal environment, right? Large volumes of data being generated and being pushed somewhere. So think of an event stream as, and I'll go through them in a bit more detail. So we have the event stream coming in, we do some stuff with it, we store it somewhere. That's what the event house is. And then we have an activator. So think about that as something that is triggering an event should something happen, right? So a threshold is passed, that sort of thing. Dashboards, of course, because we want to be able to visualize the data and querying and so on and so forth. You see down the bottom here, One Lake, so that's where we're talking about our longer term storage, and that's kind of like slower data, potentially. So what's the difference between these two things? I'm going to hop off the stage here. Maybe the camera can't follow me. But you can see on the left-hand side there, a bunch of things. A bunch of things that kind of sort of work together, but it's really about, you've got to create all the plumbing and all this sort of stuff, and it's a lot of effort to get to the point where you need in order to build your solution, right? And then on this side, of course, you can see something that's a little bit more controlled and homogenized. I'm going to talk very briefly later on about Digital Twin Builder. Has anybody used Azure Digital Twins? Yeah, so your mileage may vary, of course, with that, and sometimes it's good. So, the older version of Digital Twins was arguably a lot worse. The new version is actually still pretty good, but I think the presentation this afternoon is going to touch on some of that Digital Twin stuff as well, so it's probably worth going on to that. So let's talk a bit more about the individual parts. That's showing, isn't it? Yeah. So we do love a design surface. I mean, anybody in the room, and a few hands are going to go up, certainly at the front here. BizTalk people. Yeah, okay, usual suspects. So we love a drag and drop interface, right? A low or no code. I did notice that there was mention this morning of a citizen developer, not a phrase I particularly like, but it's, the idea is putting the right tools in the hands of the right people to accelerate our ability to deliver things. So you can see here, this is very, very visual. Connectors, it's all very, very familiar to us. So it's all designed to make things a lot simpler and a lot easier. And I guess if you think about the way this works, you've got large-scale ingestion that side. So think about your event hub, event grid, obviously that was announced this morning, IoT hub, those sorts of things on that side. Think about doing some processing, some transformation and so on and so forth. So that's kind of your stream analytics type thing, right? So again, this is kind of homogenizing those parts of the old ecosystem. And on the right-hand side, obviously putting it somewhere, which would typically be the next thing, Event House. So again, show of hands. It's a very interactive session. Who's used Azure Data Explorer? Yeah, quite a few people, right? So think of Event House Excuse me. Oh, that's sparkling. I wasn't expecting that. So think of Event House as a kind of a plane that sits above a bunch of KQL databases. Right, so think of it as kind of like Data Explorer, essentially. Probably a little bit easier to use, I think, personal view. Obviously, it supports time series data, same as KQL does. I'm really interested to try and have a play with it. I mentioned operational historians earlier on. Operational historians are extremely expensive assets in the world of mining and in the world of manufacturing. I'd be really interested to see if we can actually create almost like a cloud historian with this. Because the typical reason why you'd have an operational historian is things go missing. Data sometimes goes missing. You need things like inference and virtual tags to create a better view of your overall operational processes. I'd be really interested to see if we can use some of that with KQL to fill in those gaps. So if anybody's interested in collaborating on that sort of thing, let me know at the end. I've mentioned activators. I'm not sure I like the word activator, but it says what it does. So if you can imagine that you've got a threshold that's passed, anomaly detection, so KQL supports anomaly detection. So that ability to then take something and take action as a result. So that kind of decision making to a degree, but also taking action. So think about how that might work in terms of a typical IoT scenario. A typical IoT scenario where you have that command and control, you have your devices and you can send messages back. As a result of that, something happening, we would be able to call out, say, an Azure function or something like that and send a message back through, say, IoT Hub through the service layer. So all of those things are all possible and all contained within Fabric. So anybody who's had a play with Data Explorer or has done anything around app insights, those sorts of things, will be, I won't say familiar with Custo, KQL, but will know what it looks like. Now, personally, it makes my eyes bleed a little bit. It's not the most obvious thing, if I'm totally honest. It's fairly arcane in the way that it works, but it is super, super powerful. It's expressive in its own way, I guess. It's probably the way to describe it. And you can see something there that shows and describes it. Right, but because it's arcane, there's a bunch of cheat sheets around as well, right? So it makes life a lot easier. Let me just realised that I don't have my glasses on, which is probably why I can't see anything. So yeah, there's a bunch of cheat sheets around because obviously it is pretty difficult, I would say, but as I say, quite expressive. And I'm going to show a few examples when I go through some stuff as well. What time have we got? Okay. Right, so for me, I think the key thing around any of this sort of stuff is, and again, going back to that whole idea of a data flow, we gather data, we move it somewhere, we analyze it. I was saying to Rick down the front here outside that you go back 20 years and everybody said the most key asset in our business are the people, because that's where all the knowledge is, right? Nowadays, of course, if you probably ask that question of a CIO, they'll say data. They will undoubtedly say data. Storage is cheap. Store everything and you can process it. But like all of these things, as a person that needs to get value from that data, I need to be able to see an outcome. So storage of data in and of itself, not relevant. Well, it's relevant because you still need it. But I need to be able to make decisions based on that data. And what that means is I've got to be able to visualize it, right? So again, anybody who's used ADX, so Data Explorer, will be familiar with this kind of look because it basically uses the same technology under the hood. The dashboards inside Fabric or real-time intelligence are essentially ADX dashboards. But again, the whole point really is that you visualize the data you need. So think about, oh, hang on, is that me standing on a cable? Think about what you need, think about how you visualize that, and that's the way it works. You can also use Power BI if you're more familiar with that. But of course, the whole point here is it's large volumes of data being analyzed by a processing engine whose very job is to create these kinds of dashboards. So you can use Power BI, but it's probably not as expressive. Right. And the other big thing is this real-time hub, just a single control plane where you can see everything that's going on, essentially, right? So that's kind of one of the key parts to for management and operations. Allows you to set things like alerts and so on and so forth, and activators as a result of an alert. But essentially, they're the key aspects. So you think about your inbound data, the event stream, storage from a perspective of real-time analytics. That's event house, the KQL querying as well, and the dashboards, and so on and so forth, and then some centralized location, right? So with that, I'm conscious that I need to get something done. I'm probably going to do a few demos or a couple of demos. This is where I do need my glasses. Some of these interstitial slides, by the way, were generated by Copilot. So if you don't like the look of them, then speak to the powers that are going to become our overlords in the future. And probably not too far away, but they are. Right, so if we go into there. Wrong one. That one, right. So this is Fabric. What I want to do before I talk about this particularly is, like all things, I suppose, Azure and so on, there's a cost involved. Sometimes it's not always easy to determine what that cost is, so you have to have a little bit of a guess, and nobody likes sticker shock. So there is this capacity estimator for Fabric, where you can put in roughly what the data is that you need, how much streaming you're doing, and so on and so forth. And it gives you a good estimate as to what capacity you need. F2 is the cheapest. It goes up to ridiculously expensive amounts of money per month. But if you're a large-scale bank, again, I was talking to one of the people earlier on, Rio Tinto were one of the 4 organisations in Australia that were allowed to have reserved capacity in the Australian data centres for OpenAI service at $500,000 a month. So that's £250,000 a month that they reserved, just so as they could use it. So again, we're talking about potentially very, very large scale, very, very expensive implementations. Right, so where was we? Power BI is not authorized. That's handy. Right. So what I've done is I've just created a workspace here, so we can go into this over here and we can see the workspaces that we've got. So I've got a couple, because I'll probably try and do a couple of demos if I can, if there's time. Excuse me. But essentially, think of a workspace as kind of like a place where you store things together. That's what we're talking about there, right? So let's go to this demo again. So what I'm going to do is go to this new item, and it opens up a control plane again, or a little plane, and you can see here all the things that you have available to you. It's a real toolkit. I won't go through all of them because, frankly, no one probably cares. But there's things that are not just Azure. There's things that are way outside Azure as well, of course, because the nice thing about Azure is it supports many, many things. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in here an event house. So remember, event house is that data storage, essentially. So I'm going to hopefully type this correctly. Event house. Yeah, I do. Integrate. That's better. I'm not quite sure why that keeps coming up. And it's going to go away and it's going to create my event house. And you can see there that very naggy. Oh dear. Right. So you can see there's a bunch of stuff that it's put on that nice little plane for me to have a bit of a play with. I won't wander around too much. You can see that it's created a database for the same name as the overall store. Right, so that's good. That's what we want. And there's a bunch of things we can add and do in here, right? So, but I won't dwell on that. Well, I will in a bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a streaming now. So if I go new item. And I'm going through this because it shows you how quickly and easy it is to do, right? So I've got not 38 minutes. I don't think that doesn't seem right, but well, maybe it is. Right, so I'm going to create a new event stream. That's only just started that, so obviously my license or something has expired. It'll go away and think about it, and then it will come back with that design surface that we were talking about showing earlier on. So I'm going to use some sample data because I'm actually going to run through essentially one of the tutorials. I'm going to show that later on at the end because it's a really good tutorial actually. It shows you what you can do and it shows enough of the components that you can actually build a complete solution. So I'd certainly encourage you to go through that. You can see there's bicycles. There's a bunch of data in here that's just standard pieces of data that you can play with. So stock market prices, buses, so on and so forth. So if you just want to get playing with it and having a look at the capability, then it's a really good source to start with. So we're going to choose bikes. And that's that design surface. So right now it doesn't seem very interesting, right? We've got something that is data at the beginning, something that's the stream, and then something that says transform events and add destination, right? So we've got some work that we need to do, right? So that's good. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go manage fields. And you can see there's a bunch of other stuff there as well. So setup is required. It's very helpful. So you can see I can add my own fields, or from that data set that I've just brought in, I can add all the fields. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So there they are. And because I know that I need to do something else, I'm going to come in here. I'm not going to select a field. I'm going to add a new field, and that is going to be of type down here, timestamp, because this is what we need, and I'm going to call that timestamp. Add. So now I've added a new field to my inbound data, right? So I've got my data, and I'm elaborating on that data, enriching that data. Just going to go away and think about it. Right, and there's an error, which is a shame. There's an error because I haven't said where it's going, right? Because I need to send it somewhere, right? So I'm going to add a destination. I'm going to go send it to event house. And can anybody remember what I called my event house? I knew Dan would remember. Destination. I really should choose destination. That's not right. I really should choose shorter names. Right. So, integrate 2025 demo. It actually tells me, look, I didn't have to remember it at all. So that's good. Right. So, you can see here that I'm going to choose my database, and now I need to tell it where it's going. Right. So, it's saying, looking in my event house, is there a table there already or not? It's taking a very long time. I noticed this in the other room, actually. It seems to be taking a very long time to do stuff. Thank you, Fabric. So talk amongst yourselves. Right, whilst it's loading that, has anybody got any questions so far? Because it's taken a bit of a time. So, no, you're all enthralled. Fantastic. Okay. That is taking a very, very long time. Oh, there we go. Right, no item found. So I'm going to call it this because I know that's what my scripts call it. So raw data, and you can see that it's JSON format, and you can see at the bottom here, activate ingest and ingestion after adding, so it will start streaming data as soon as I go in, right? So if I click save, wow, come on, and you can see now I've got 2 errors, fantastic. So we'll just join those two together. Visual interface, right, all good. So now I've got my data stream, some ingestion engine. I've said what I want the shape of my data to be, and I've got somewhere to store it. Publish, and off it goes. So this is now publish it, and it will start running because I said activate once I've saved. Need to be careful of that. Anybody else who's presenting in here, just be a little bit careful of that cable down there, because that's what I think is causing the screen to bomb out. Hopefully that will go very soon, again. But in the meantime, whilst it's thinking about that, I'm going to go and start doing other things anyway. And hopefully it will catch up. So if I go to my workspace, again, you can see I've got a few things here now. I've got my stream, I've got my my event house, and I've got this query set, right? So if I go to that query set, anybody, again, who's done Data Explorer will be very, very familiar with this kind of interface, right? So KQL in that little panel, bunch of information around the data, materialized views, and so on and so forth. So the other thing I'm going to talk to, because of the way it builds this demo, is who's familiar with the data architecture, the medallion architecture? Yeah, medallion architecture. So essentially what you have typically is, it's called a medallion architecture, but it's think of it as gold, silver, and bronze, or bronze, silver, and gold, actually. So you store your data in whatever format you want it. That's the typical way you do it. So raw data, you've seen I've got raw data here. You may do some playing around with that data, and essentially what the medallion architecture is doing is you're curating more of the data as you move through those architectural layers, right? So think about bronze, which would be your raw data with a bit of playing. You may move into the silver layer, where you may have done more curation or transformation. Typically, the silver layer is where you've cleaned your data. And then the gold layer is where you do your presentations. You'll have your semantic models and the things that the business people understand, because the business people might not know byte point ID means something. So you want to transform it into a format that means something to business people. So typically that's where you'd be playing in things like Power BI. But we're not going to be playing in Power BI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my little script here and grab a bunch of things. So let me just grab all that, and then I can run a bit at a time. So you can see at the top one, I think I called it raw underscore data, so I'm going to have to amend that, aren't I? That was a bit erroneous, but there you are. Right, so raw underscore data. So you can see we've got the definition of the table there, and I'm altering it because what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it. I'm going to move that data, he says, trying to scroll, into a bronze layer. So essentially I'm moving my raw data. So I'm not actually doing any transformation here, I'm just moving it. So if I was to run this, oops. You can see it's done some stuff, and it's moved that raw data table into a folder called bronze. Right, so we're starting to build that medallion architecture, essentially. You can see here that I've got a transformed data. Remember, I'm saying that we go from bronze to silver tends to be where you do your data cleansing. You may do some curation of the data at that point, but very often it's just data cleansing. And you can see here that what we've got is we've got byte point ID as a string in the raw data, and byte point ID as an integer in the transformed data. Other than that, this is just really creating a table, and it's creating it in a folder called silver. It's that medallion architecture. Oops. So we'll just run that. 30 minutes. So you will now see I've got a bronze layer and I've got a silver layer. This doesn't contain anything currently because I've not done anything with it. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to transform it again. See, raw data. I know I should have followed the script. So this is creating just essentially like a user-defined function. The next thing that I'm going to show is what will execute this user-defined function. But essentially what they're saying is I want you to parse the byte point ID, and I want you to take out the piece of text. So if we were to look at that text, let me just show you what say. We'll just take some 10 random rows from that data. So as you can see what it looks like. And you can see that byte point ID has got byte points underscore 590 and so on, and a bunch of other things. So what this is doing is making that an integer. So we'll just run that. And it's also adding some additional data. So you can see here if bytes to be filled is greater than 0, fill that column with the number of bytes, otherwise we'll say not applicable. So again, it's just a transformation. So this is essentially, we're building that silver layer, that cleansed data, right? So that's done that. The next thing is we need to tell it when to execute that function. So that's what this update policy is doing. So essentially, or policy update, beg your pardon. So saying, okay, well, when data lands, I need you to run that function. Okay, so You can see it says transform raw data in there. So if we run that, then what we hope is that that doesn't happen. Sorry? Oh, yes, yes, thank you. See, this is where I should just follow the script. Thank you. Right, run. Yes. Right, so it's now done that. So we would hope that now the data is streaming in and landing in that raw underscore data table, rather than raw data table. And it's now should be executing this function to remove that byte point ID and fill in those extra fields. So if we were to take a look at that table, it sometimes takes a bit of time to show. So we'll probably possibly come back to that. But then we would see what's happening, right? So that's kind of what we want to do. We just give this a couple of extra times. All right, we'll come back to that. So the next thing I wanted to show is some queries. So I'm going to just grab most of this. Just grab those bits there to start with. Right, so we'll add a new tab because it's just a bit easier. So again, show of hands. Who's done a bunch of stuff with notebooks, Jupyter notebooks, that sort of thing, Python, SDKs, so on and so forth, building charts and all that sort of thing. So you can see here the render. So all that functionality is just built into KQL. So we can do all our charting all within the same interface. So this may or may not show something, depending on if it's actually got any data yet. No results found, so it really is taking a long time today, which is a shame. But we'll come back to that, that's fine. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is a materialized view. Again, this is something that's very, very typical in terms of any transactional database as well, data store. You know, the whole idea of building something which is more representative of what you want to see. So in the context of our medallion architecture, this is very typically where we'll be creating that semantic model that means something to people. So you'll see here that it says create a materialized view in folder gold because that's what we're doing. We're creating that last part of the solution. Although I have seen that medallion architecture that also has a platinum layer, which is, could depend on what technology you're using. So in the particular case that we had, the platinum layer was because we had a bunch of analysts who didn't want to use Power BI and just wanted to use essentially SQL. So we made a copy of that data into a platinum layer so they could go nuts and do what they needed to do. So we'll just try this again, just see if it's come through yet. Still no results, shame. Fabric's obviously having a hard time. It'd be really interesting to see Kevin's demo later on. I mean, I hope he's got all this stuff already stored up, right? We'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and create that gold materialized view. And you can see if I just do a refresh here. Hang on, where is it? Come on. Oh, materialized view there. Right, gold. Sorry, going mad. Right, so you can see there's a gold layer now as well. That didn't exist before, you'll have to take my word for it, and that's called aggregated data. And of course, I'm going to query this, and it's not going to work because there is no data. Fun, fun, fun. Oh, no, there is. Right, cool. Good. So it's obviously come through. So you can see again, it's doing this rendering. It's already doing that for us. So that's all great and chunky and great. So I think for me, that is kind of like, from a perspective of validation, I guess, as the people that we are. So if I now go into here and do the transform data take 10, hopefully that will now display some stuff. Oh, just a little curiosity with this actually. So depending on where you are, quite often in this window, sometimes the run button doesn't light up. So if you ever get that experience, and you know, very often I've had this experience where if there's two lines, two carriage returns, the run button doesn't light up. If you go back one carriage return, it just lights up. I don't know. I guess there's smarter people than me that build the interface. So let's run that. And yeah, so now we've got data, right? And you can see that byte point ID is now an integer, right? So that's good. That's what we were hoping for. And then over here a bit, oops, you can see bikes to be filled and the action. So when there's no bikes, we get not available. Right, so that seems to have all worked. That's good. Fantastic. You can take that one to the bank. So now I want to talk about dashboards, because that's the next natural piece, right? We talked about querying, we talked about all the other stuff, so I'm going to just add a new window here. And you'll see what we have just here is pinned to dashboard. So again, I don't need to leave the interface. I'm staying inside this environment, which is all very good. And anybody who's done, again, ADX, so Data Explorer, will be familiar with this interface. But the point here is that how quick and easy it is to create something that has value. So again, shame. Oh, of course, I didn't talk about this. Yeah, let me just talk about this, right? Because for people who really, really do not like KQL, and if you're like me, then you're probably one of them, it supports SQL as well, right? So if I go into here, I just highlight that, then it runs and it creates. So you can use your old school SQL if you're really into it. What's quite fun, so anybody used GitHub Copilot chat? Yeah? So when you've got a code block, you can highlight a code block and ask it to explain it. Yeah? So very similar to that. I can go explain. And what it will do is not just explain it. It will, he says, hopefully, come back with a KQL that represents that query. So if you do really, really dislike KQL, but you feel that you need to litter your domain with KQL, just write it in SQL and then do explain. And everybody will bask in your knowledge and glory of KQL. So it's a great way of smoke and mirrors. Right. So dashboards, because as I said before, that is really where the rubber hits the road when it comes to the data. People don't look at raw data. Well, some people do, but most people look at representations of data. So I'm going to grab this. Right, so I'm going to run that one first. I don't know why I put that at the beginning there. That's fine. Oops. What did I just do? Right. Let's get rid of that. Right, so you'll see here what I'm doing is I'm creating a chart. So sorting by bike ID, column chart, very good. If I run that, we'll see the same experience that we saw before, that chart. I get a bunch of information over the right-hand side here about how I can format it, what it looks like, and so on and so forth. So think about the way you build charts in Excel is very similar to that sort of thing, right? So again, it's a tool set that's very familiar to people, which is good. But I click Pin to Dashboard. He says, trying to do that, right. I'll add a new dashboard, integrate. It's always hard to type when people are watching. If I have a dashboard. So this is aggregated data by bike point ID. So by bike point ID. Doesn't really matter what I call it for now. Bike point ID. Create. Goes away and thinks about it. Hopefully not too long. And there we are, right? So I've just created a visualization, pinned it to a dashboard. You can see up here I can share that dashboard. So all of a sudden I've very, very simply just written a very basic query. So as a data analyst, I can write these dashboards very quickly and then share it to my entire organization if I want to. I can also resize all these things, of course. Oh, hang on. I'm on viewing at the moment, editing. I can resize these things, of course, as much as I want, so to make it look and be pretty. That's not really my thing. I'm a developer, right? So I build really, really horrible interfaces. That's why people get paid more money than I do to do other things, right? So hang on, let me just go back to that. Right. So you can see up here I've got new tile, new text tile, and so on and so forth. So I can do things like, so this supports GitHub markup. So I can do things like put logos and all manner of things like that on there and links to other things because it just supports GitHub markup. Or I can do a new tile because that's what I want to do. Just get rid of that and then come and grab my query. change that so as it's right. So you can see here, pretty straightforward. So this is bike data for London. Anybody a Chelsea fan? Good. So I don't have to comment then. So this is just obviously going to run and get data that's from that area. And you can see just a bunch of information. So that's all good, right? So I can go apply changes. I'm going to come back to this add visual for another example in a second, but I can just visualize this from this control plane if I want to. I'm going to apply those changes. And remember, I was on that dashboard and I said new tile. So this is going to apply those changes and apply it to that dashboard. Right, so that's why that's now appeared. So that's good. That's what we want to see. Right. You can see here I can edit it. I can change the name. So new tile isn't terribly interesting, is it? So let's just change the name. And we'll call that Bikes in Chelsea. Not Chelsea. It's no longer owned by Roman Abramovich, right? So that's fine. Right. So apply changes. So Bikes in Chelsea. If I click this Explore Data, you can see it's basically opened up something that shows me all of the information in that particular data set. Some visualizations over the right-hand side. I can wander through this. There's 11 unique streets in Chelsea, or in this data set, and some neighborhoods and various other things, and latitude and longitude of where these places are. If I come up here, so again, this is that data engineering and data analysis stuff, right? So I can come in here and I can add an aggregation. And I'll do the maximum number of bikes. Number of bikes. Max bikes. And then I can do additional groupings. So I can group by particular things. In this case, I'm going to group by street. So I can say, okay, what's the maximum number of bikes per street? And I can add as many of these as I want. So again, this is that sort of deeper data analytics. So I'm going to go street, apply. And we can see that that's there, right? That's great, fantastic. I can pin that to the dashboard as well, up here to my existing dashboard. Come on. It's taking a very long time. Oh, in this dashboard. That's probably easier. Yeah, let's do that. Right, so what was this? This was aggregation. And there we are. Fantastic. Right, so within, a few minutes, I've got a bunch of data tiles that are telling me information that I may care about. I can rearrange these, of course. I might just need to resize that ever so slightly. Not like that. Drag and drop, right? Fantastic. So that's what we want, because that's what productivity is about. Now, what I didn't show is that when you do the KQL querying, I don't have a Copilot license in my tenant, so I couldn't show that, but you can use natural language to build the KQL that will then you can then use to build your dashboards. Right, fantastic. Right, so let me just go back and get the next bit. Let's just do this. I'll do a new tile. I'm going to fix up my information. Right. Run that. So this is where we're going to come back to this add visual. And one thing that's really, really cool, and it's just, again, just something that's really, really quick and easy to do, is I can do mapping as well, right? So I come in here, I don't want to infer it, I want to define it by latitude and longitude. So the inference isn't very good there, is it? But we won't worry about that. Longitude, right? And so on. Apply those changes. And all of a sudden I've got a map tile as well. So, think about how quickly I did that. That was all, me talking, of course, was an extra 10 or 15 minutes. I've got ADHD, right, so I talk a lot. But it didn't take very long for me to create something which presumably would be of value, right? And then, of course, I can save this, flick this back to view, and then I can share this. So within no time at all, I've created something that is hopefully of value. I guess that depends on people's views, but yes, sorry.
Great demo, really cool. You're talking about medallion architecture. You've basically created data products, right, from a bronze and silver and gold data products. Really cool at a citizen level. How would you scale that at the enterprise level? How would you perhaps expose some of those data products for others in your enterprise to consume?
So remember that this is just the real-time streaming. Under the hood of all this is things like Lakehouse, which allows you to push that data into a more, I suppose, familiar data analytics kind of architecture. Oh no, it's a small room. More sort of typical sort of data and analytics engine. So anybody who's done things like with Synapse, Spark, any of those sort of products, where you have your notebooks, where you can actually do proper, so more in-depth, should we say, data engineering and management. All of that is still available to you. This is just the real-time stuff. So if you want to do that sort of deeper analytics, you'd actually just mirror these database tables or these event house tables into one lake or into a lake house, and then it's the very, very similar experience to Synapse Analytics. Yeah, so good question. Right, what I didn't show over here was this real-time hub. So again, this is that single plane view of everything. So if I was to go into, say, my raw data here, as an example, or no, let's go into the stream, right? Right, and you can see there's that set alert. Right, so again, as you rightly point out, this is all very clickable. It's all very useful and very quick to do. So I can very quickly just set up an alert. So this is that activator stuff, essentially. So once that's, oh, that's nice. So I'll try that again. Your mileage may vary. So slow. So what I'd normally expect is a flyout here, where I can select particular data points and say, I don't know why that's not working. My data stream is clearly active. Obviously, there's a loading issue here, right? So it's waiting to load the window. But essentially, I can do things very simply. I can go, I want to use a fabric item, so I could have some other data output that sends the data somewhere. I could, oh, sorry, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. My question was, what's your experience in like the portability with the new solution? Because that's one thing as an infrastructure and deployment engineer, working with the old way, we could put it in Terraform, Bicep, whatever, and more readily deploy it to multiple tenants for our clients. So what's that kind of experience look like?
So you see this deployment pipeline? So that's, right, yes, that's kind of what you do. So think of it, I guess it works, broadly. Anybody got much experience with solution files in Dynamics? Where you kind of package up a solution and you can ship it? Similar sort of things to that. It's different, but it's similar. In the sense that what you're building is you're building a solution and you deploy the whole solution. But if you're talking about, is it GitHub Actions? Then no, it's not. It's its own solution, right? So, but good question, though, yeah. But I don't have much experience with that. Ask Kevin that question later on. I'm sure he'll be only too overjoyed to hear feedback about that sort of stuff. He might not know the answer because he's talking about real-time analytics, real-time intelligence, rather than Fabric more specifically, because that's a Fabric function, right, obviously. So, right, so I've got 8 minutes left. Right, so one thing that I wanted to talk about very, very quickly was digital twins. Again, a very brief conversation with the powers suggests that if you're going to be doing anything with digital twins going forwards, you should probably use this solution rather than Azure Digital Twins. I won't say that there's no investment going into Azure Digital Twins. I don't hold the purse strings. But obviously, like most of these things, like AI and all these sorts of things, right, the investment goes where people are using the tools. So I did just want to talk very, very quickly about the Digital Twins preview. So I've got another demo here. And I'll just very quickly create another couple of new items in here. So firstly, I'm going to create a lake house. See, mirrored snowflake. for those people that care about that sort of thing. Oh, hang on. Yes, this is. I've created this in the wrong environment. So I'm using the trial environment for some things, and I'm using fabric capacity for others. So I've created this in the wrong environment. So I'll just very quickly create a new workspace in the right environment. That's great. 25. DT2. This is worth remembering. It's worth pointing this out actually, right? So when you create a workspace, if you've got multiple fabric capacities that you're wanting to assign things to, you need to click this advanced drop down, because otherwise it will just choose something. Oops. And you can see here that I've got a bunch of things, including a fabric capacity down the bottom. So I scaled this up to an F4 this morning. So hopefully, yeah, I must remember to shut this down after this presentation. Otherwise, I'll be making my bosses very, very grumpy. So I'm hoping this will now work. Right, so there, good, that works. Integrate 2025 Lake. But in the interest of the 6 minutes that I've got left, what I was going to do is I was going to create an event stream, so an event house and event stream, but that's all very formulaic and something that we've already done, so I won't bother doing that. But what I will show is if I go back to my demo workspace here, new item. But before I show this, what I want to do is I want to go home. So by default, the digital twin preview is not set up for your environment, right? So if I go to my admin settings here, so you need obviously admin rights to do this. So this digital twin preview, by default, is turned off. You have to be using fabric capacity in order to enable this and use it. So you can't just use the trial instance. You saw that I couldn't create stuff in the trial instance. But it's worth finding out where that is, because if you want to use the digital twins builder, then this is where you do it. So workspaces. So anybody who's played with digital twins in the past, you know the interface. Thank you. You know the interface. You create the various models and you create relationships between them. So that's all very good. Down here. Come on. That's great. 2025 DT. Whatever. And once this is loaded, you'll see something that hopefully is pretty obvious as to how you use it. Again, it's a visual interface. So I'm sure there's been a bunch of people who have been targeted with writing something that people can understand straight away. I've never given it to my children to play with, but you never know, right? Maybe they can understand. Right, so if I go in here, I can add something. There's a bunch of entity types that are already defined, which will come with certain metrics. Or I can just choose generic and build something myself. Well, I was going to do a bus stop one, so I'll just add an entity called bus. It's in the interest of time. So this is all very boring, right? I can add another one. Let's just add another entity called stop, because that's what we were going to do. And you can see I can add a relationship between those things. Right. So again, what I'm doing is I'm building a semantic model that represents this, a kind of like almost a physical representation of my digital world. And if I go into these no mappings, right? So I go into mappings. There's nothing in my lakehouse or anything like that, but you can click add. I can choose lakehouse tables. So digital twin works with lakehouse, not event house. So if you're getting streaming data into event house, it's very, very, very simple. I'll just show the query actually, because I was going to do it through something else. But if we go into here, no, not there. There, digital twin, DT. You can see here this last bit, this last line here. Essentially, what we're doing is we're saying, let's take the table that I'm pushing all my streaming data in and mirror it into Lakehouse. Right. So that's what that's doing. So if I had data in my lakehouse, I would just simply select this, and then I'd just choose the items that I want to be part of the thing that's represented in this semantic model. Right? Now, has anybody had a play with the 3D scenes preview? So there's a very famous demo with the 3D. It's a piece of stuff that Microsoft wrote. It uses a thing called Babylon.js under the hood, which is a 3D rendering engine. They've kind of like sunsetted that to a degree, but they've made it available as a thing called IoT Cardboard. So if you're interested in playing around with 3D visualizations, IoT Cardboard is the place to go. And you can download this, and as you can see here, you've got 3D scenes configuration. So if you've got, say, a 3D view in something like most CAD packages can export things in GLB format. This supports GLB format, so you can bring those in and start putting data points on your images. So that's all very fun. But essentially, what I want to see, and I'm keen to, I can't actually go to the presentation that Kevin's doing, so I'll have to ask all you guys questions later on, is they're going to demonstrate some of this digital twin stuff, right? So this is kind of like the new paradigm for digital twins. So I'd strongly recommend if you want to see how this works, go along to Kevin and Alicia's presentation later on. Right, so broadly, that's everything done. I've got a minute left, that's good, and Bill's at the back and he's looking at me with the evils, so that's fine. If you've got any questions, I'm around all the time. I'm usually in a very bright shirt, so you can't miss me most of the time. But other than that, I'm quite impressed, and thank you, because I was up against what's new in Logic Apps, and I felt sure that I'd have Rick and Tom and Joanne, and that would be it. So thank you all for coming along and allowing me to prattle on for an hour and talk about real-time analytics. So thank you.